Hello everyone, welcome to valuetrainings.com. So now let's see identifying the elements with the help of Selenium WebDriver. How Selenium works and how can you identify the various elements on the web page like buttons, text fields, links, radio buttons, checkboxes and all. Well, the answer to that is Selenium works on the page source. If you visit any website and if you go to the page source of that website, say suppose if I go to bbc.com website and if I go to the page source of this web page, you will see that there are various tags and attributes on this very particular web page, and then we have tags under tags as well. So with the help of tags and attributes we actually identify the objects, and on this Selenium works and it identifies the various elements on the web page. So now let's discuss about the page source. In a page source, you have tags and attributes. Now, what are these tags and attributes? For example, we have an anchor tag which represents the link on the web page, and every tag can have multiple attributes associated with it. For example, ID, class, href and all. Right. So based on these tags and attributes, Selenium works and it identifies them as well. Alright, so now how Selenium works and how it actually identifies the elements on the basis of these tags and attributes, let's discuss that. Well, in order to understand that, I'll simply make one Excel file, that is, say, identifying the elements, and I open it. Alright, now over here we will categorize the various elements, that is, say I have elements, then I have tag name, then there is something known as the mandatory attributes. You have something called as mandatory attributes, and then you have optional attributes. Okay, so we have this. Now, what all elements can you see on the web page? What all elements can you see on the web page? Say suppose we have text field, then we have buttons on the web page, right? Then what else you have? Then we have radio buttons, then we have check boxes. Alright, then we have the links as well on the web page, then we have image also, okay, and then we have a drop down as well. Alright, and then there are various other elements like web tables, frames, pop-ups and various other. So I'll be discussing about these for the time being. The common elements, these are the most frequently used elements on any web page that you will see on the web page. Alright, okay, and then every element has a tag name associated with it. Every element will have a tag name associated with it, right? And then there are some attributes which are the mandatory attributes, and then there are some attributes which are the optional one, which might or might not be present. So how will you identify these elements? These elements, how will you identify them? Well, in order to identify these elements and the tag name and the various attributes for these all elements, you need to first of all install a plugin in the Firefox. That is, you need to install an extra plugin, that is Firebug. So you simply go to Firefox and just search for Firebug for the Firefox browser. Alright, so we'll talk about Chrome and IE as well. Let's talk about the Firebug in Firefox first, because you cannot go to the page source every time to identify the elements on the page source. It becomes a little tough over there. Right, so Firebug will make your work a little easier. So we'll just open with the first link in order to install the Firebug plugin. Okay, and make sure you open it in Firefox only. Alright, so this is a plugin only for the Firefox browser. Alright, this Firebug plugin, and we simply click on add to Firefox. Okay, so it will be added on your Firefox browser. Alright, okay, so you see that. So after the installation, it says Firebug has been installed successfully. So after the installation of the Firebug, you will see an icon at the top in the Firefox browser, which is the icon of the Firebug. Alright, so you can simply see that this is how your Firebug will look like. This is your Firebug. Okay, fine. Now when you open this Firebug, you will get this window. Now in the HTML tab, okay, this is your HTML tab, you will see the HTML page source of the web page, and you can even see the small arrow icon over here as well, this small arrow icon. So if you click on this arrow and you simply take your mouse to any field, to any element on the web page, it will give you the description of that particular element, that is the text field. Alright, so you just click on this arrow and just move your mouse anywhere you want to inspect, which element you want to work with, and that will give you the complete description of that particular element. For example, if I go to gmail.com website, okay, I'll simply click on this sign in link. Alright, okay, now if I click on this arrow and if you take your mouse anywhere which element you want to inspect, say suppose if I want to inspect this create account link, so here you see that it says that it is an anchor tag with the attribute href as one of the attributes associated with it. So this will make your work a little easy. Right, I just move my mouse to any element I want to work with, and it will give you the complete description of that particular element. So if you want to identify the objects in the Chrome browser, then in the Chrome browser what we have is, we have Chrome Inspector. For example, if I go to gmail.com on the Chrome browser, okay, if I go to the gmail.com on the Chrome browser and say suppose if I want to inspect this link create account, I want to inspect this link on the web page. Now in the Chrome browser, inspector is already inbuilt. We need not to install an extra plugin for the Chrome browser. It is already inbuilt. That is, if you right click on this create account link, you will get an option, that is this inspect option. You just select this inspect option and you will see the Chrome Inspector window coming up. Okay, it opens up with the page source of that link, that is this anchor tag with the href attribute highlighted. So there is also an arrow on the Chrome browser as well. You simply click on this arrow and just move your mouse anywhere you want to inspect the element, and it will give you the description of that particular element as well. You get the page source of that element also. Alright, so this is how you work on the Chrome browser, and similarly if you want to work with the IE browser, if I open my IE browser, then in the IE browser also you have got the IE developer tool, which is also an inbuilt tool. We need not to install anything extra for the IE browser also. Right, say suppose if I simply right click on this tool, this text field inspect element, I select inspect element. Alright, so you see that it will open up the IE inspector tool window and it will give you the description for the for this particular text field as well. Alright, so over here also we have this arrow. I simply take my mouse to anywhere I want to take, right, and it will give you the description of that element also. Same goes with all the three browsers. Alright, okay, but we don't generally do like this. We just investigate in the Firefox browser and we work with the Selenium script. We just investigate in the Firefox browser. You don't need to separately investigate in the other browsers because page source of the website remains same across all the browsers. Page source will not change which you are investigating. Right? This is a response from the server. Alright, this is the response from the server. It will not change for the different browsers. It will remain same across all the browsers. So if you investigate in the Chrome, IE or Firefox browser, you will get the same page source. So what we prefer in Selenium is that we usually identify the objects in a Mozilla only with the help of this Firebug plugin, and you can implement that across different browsers in your script. You don't have to investigate the same element across different browsers, right? We usually investigate in the Firefox browser only. So if we talk about the Excel file now, for example, the first element is the text field. Now, what is the tag name associated with the text field? If I consider, like for example, we have this Gmail website with us. Over here, we have this as the text field, right? Now, if I inspect this username text field, out here you see that we have an input tag associated with the text field. So, with the text field, you have a tag that is the input tag. Alright, similarly for the buttons, we have this as the next button on this Gmail website, and with this next button also you have a tag that is the input tag. So for this button also we have the input tag, right? And similarly for the radio buttons also we have the input tag. For the checkboxes also we have the input tag, right? Okay, but for the links, now for the link we don't have the input tag. Now say for example we have this as one of the link, find my account. Now for the links, what tag you have? You have an anchor tag associated with the link. So with the link we have an anchor tag. Alright, okay. But the mandatory attributes will differ for different elements. The mandatory attributes will differ. Now in case of the text field, now what is the mandatory attribute that has to be present for the text field? Now say suppose we have this text field, username text field, which is over here. So out here this says that it is an input tag whose ID is this, value is this, and various other attributes. Now the mandatory attribute for the text field is type is equal to email. So mandatory attribute is type is equal to email for the text field, or else we have type is equal to text as well. So sometimes you might find type is equal to email, or sometimes you might find type is equal to text also for the text field. Alright, so type attribute varies in case of all the elements rather. Now say suppose we have the next element as the button. Now for the button, what is the mandatory attribute? That is, for the button we have type is equal to submit. We have type is equal to submit. That is, we have for the button we have type is equal to submit, or else you might have type is equal to button as well. In the case of button, you might have type is equal to submit or type is equal to a button. Okay, and then for the radio button you will always find the attribute that is type is equal to radio for the buttons. Then similarly for the checkboxes, we have type is equal to checkbox. Okay, now these are the mandatory attributes which will always be present, for all these elements. Alright, now in case of the link, for example, in case of the link, we have anchor A as the tag name for the link, which you will always find with the anchor tag, with the link tag that you can see on the web page. Say suppose we have this as the link tag, so you will always find an anchor tag, and then the mandatory attribute. Now what will be the mandatory attribute associated with the link? That is, for the link you will always find the attribute, that is the href attribute. So href is the attribute which is the mandatory in case of the link tag, which will point towards the URL which opens up when you click on the URL. When you click on that particular link, this href attribute will contain the URL with it when you click on that link, right? So the tag name for the link is anchor and the mandatory attribute is the href attribute. Alright, okay. Then similarly for the image, we have img as the tag name and mandatory attribute is the src source attribute, which will also point towards the URL where that image will be taken to when you click on that image. Fine. Okay. Okay, and then for the drop down, what is the tag associated with the drop down? That is, we have the tag as the select tag associated with the drop down. Now for example, we have this as the drop down, right? This is the example of the drop down. If you try to inspect this drop down, you will see that you have this select tag associated with the drop down, which will have various options inside it. Alright, various options inside it. Okay, and then there are various optional attributes as well. Various optional attributes are also present. Okay, and then this drop down does not have any mandatory attribute. For the drop down, we don't have any mandatory attribute associated with it. There is no mandatory attribute. Alright, okay, and then comes the optional attribute. For example, the optional attribute, like what all optional attributes we have? We have ID, name and class. So these can be present or might not be present with any element on the web page. That is, the optional attributes which might or might not be present. If an element is having ID, name or a class, it becomes easy to work with it. But not every element would have it. Only the major elements might have these attributes, ID, name and class. Alright, so based on these all criteria, we will be actually identifying the elements on the web page. Now, how do we actually identify the elements? With all these tags and attributes? Let's discuss that now. Okay, so what I'll do is that I'll open up my Visual Studio and I'll create a new project. Okay, I'll add a console application project, say identifying the elements. Okay, and then inside this Visual Studio project, first of all, we will configure the Selenium DLLs in order to identify the elements with the help of the Selenium. Okay, and hold on. Alright, so we will be adding the Selenium 3.x version DLLs. Just a second. Okay, I simply right click on the references folder and I'll just go to add reference and I'll browse to my location where I have my Selenium DLLs. Okay, so it's there over here under the Selenium.NET 3.0 version. I have all these DLLs with me and I select OK. Okay, so the DLLs of the Selenium, it gets added up in the references folder. So now what we will do is that we will make a simple script which will help you take to the home page of this Gmail website, and will try to log you in by entering the username and password and clicking on this next button. So we'll do something like that script now in this Visual Studio. Alright, so firstly what we will do is that, like, we have this program.cs class file with us which contains the main method inside it. So first of all we will invoke the Firefox browser, right? So in order to invoke the Firefox browser, we will first of all create the object of the Firefox driver class, and I'll just include the reference to it that comes from openqa.selenium.firefox. Say driver is equal to new Firefox driver. Okay, and then since we are working with the latest Selenium DLLs 3.x version DLLs, so with the latest version you don't open it directly, right? You have to include the exe file path of the gecko driver.exe file, right? So for that we will have to create the Firefox driver service object is equal to Firefox driver service dot create default service, and I will include my gecko driver.exe file path. So here it is. I'll just include that. Okay, and I give the name of my gecko driver, that is gecko driver.exe. Okay, and we will, like, I'll simply put @ symbol in front of the path, which will automatically takes up the double slashes in the path, right? And then after setting the gecko driver.exe file path, we will also have to set the binary path of the Firefox browser as well. Alright, so that also I'll just take it. It's there in the C drive, program files 86. Then over here you have Mozilla Firefox, and out here you will be having your firefox.exe file with you, and you keep it over here, and I'll put the @ symbol. Fine, and then in the Firefox driver I'll simply pass my service object. Okay, right, and then one more thing, in order to open the Firefox browser we will have to set the path of this gecko driver.exe file in the environment variable as well, right? So I'll simply go to the properties of my system, advanced system settings, environment variables, and you will edit the path system variable. I'll simply edit the path system variable, and in the end you just include the path of your gecko driver.exe file in the environment variable. Okay, so I have it over here. I click on OK and OK. Alright, okay, so you have it, and then after that what you can do is that you can simply say driver dot URL is equal to, you go to http.gmail.com, a link. Alright, so now when I run my script, say suppose if I run it, so you see that it opens up the Firefox browser, right, and it takes you to the home page of the Gmail website as well. Alright, but then how will you actually identify the objects on this web page? with the help of the Firebug plugin that we have installed. How will you identify the objects? Let's discuss that now. Okay, so now for example, we have this web page with us on the Firefox browser, and then I want to investigate this username text field. Now everything in Selenium is a web element. Now what is a web element? This text field is a web element. This button is a web element. This link is a web element. Everything that you see on any web page is considered as a web element in Selenium. If you go to the official website of Selenium, that is seleniumhq.org website, over here we go to the downloads section and I simply open my API docs for C#. Okay, so if you look into the documentation of this C#, you will find an interface, that is this web element interface. So this interface, it represents an HTML element on the web page, and you have got various functions which you can perform on any element on the web page. For example, a function like click function, if you want to click on any web element, or else if you want to clear the contents of any element, then you have this clear function. Or if you want to get the location of the element on the web page, if you want to get the size of the element, if you want to get the text of the element, if you want to check whether that element is enabled or whether it is disabled or whether it is displayed or not, right? So you've got various functions which you can fire on any web element on the web page. And if you consider the WebDriver interface, you will always find a function known as the find element function. So this find element function, like it actually finds the first web element on the web page. Now what is this find element function? All our driver classes are actually implementing the web element interface. So in all the driver classes we will have this find element function, and this find element is based on a class, that is this by class. Okay, so by class is actually holding the mechanism to locate the elements on the web page. For example, we've got various locator strategies like the class name, CSS selector. Then if you want to find an element with the help of ID, with link text, with name, partial link text, tag name. So there are various locator strategies which comes under this by class. Okay, with which you can actually identify the objects on the web page. So now for example, if we consider our project, so what I will do is that I will simply say driver dot find element. All the driver classes are actually implementing the web element interface, right? And in the web element interface, find element function is there. So we can simply say driver dot find the element by which criteria, that is by dot, say I have an ID, I want to find an element, by dot, that is for the by class you will have to include the reference for it, that comes under openqa.selenium, right? So we'll simply include the reference to it, openqa.selenium namespace, and then I say by dot ID, I want to find an element by the ID. What is the ID that you have? That is, we have the ID as email, right? So we have an ID, that is I want to find an element whose ID is email. Okay, right? And if you look into the documentation as well, the find element function, the find element function, it always returns you the reference of the web element interface. The find element function, it will always give you the reference of the web element interface, right? So what we will do is that we will simply write over here I web element, say it is an email. Okay, I web element of the type email, and then we try to find the element, the email ID text field, right? So now what you want to do with this web element, you want to type into this username text field, right? So you can simply say email dot send the keys with any data you want to send. Say suppose I want to enter Selenium into it. Okay, so send keys is a function which is used to type something into the text field. If you can look into the documentation as well, send keys is a function which will help you write the data into the text field, right? That is actually there inside the find element method. Okay, hold on. Okay, so you see that send keys simulates typing the text into the web element, right? So now when I enter when now so now if I run my script, I'll simply run it. You will see an browser opening up which will take you to the Gmail website and will type into the username text field. Okay, so it opens up the Firefox browser, takes you to the Gmail website. Okay, and then you see that it enters Selenium as well into this text field. Alright, so now various questions might be coming before you, that what if multiple elements have same ID? What if multiple elements have same ID, that is email? Then what will happen? Look, Selenium actually extracts the objects on the web page. It usually extracts the objects on the web page from the top left corner to the bottom right of the web page. So as soon as it finds the first element on the web page, now say suppose we have various elements on the web page, we have 3 elements on the web page. As soon as it finds the first web element on the web page, it will simply use that web element. It will find that the first element has arrived with the command driver.find element command. And if you look into the documentation as well, find element method, it says it finds the first web element using the given method. Now what if you want to get the second or the third or the fourth web element? So we'll talk about that as well in the later classes, but just keep in mind for the time being that find element method, this find element command, it will give you the first web element using this particular method. Alright, okay, and then if you want to click on the next button, you can simply work with that as well. That is, if I inspect this next button, okay, so this is an ID whose value is equal to next. So we can simply say driver dot find the element by dot ID is next, right? Okay, and this will give us a web element. Say next button it is, and we can simply say next button dot I want to click on that element, right? So I simply say next button dot click. Okay, so what you want to do with the button, you want to click on that button, so you simply fire the click function of it. So now when you run your script again, it opens up the Firefox browser. Okay, and it enters Selenium into the text field and it clicks on the next button as well. Alright, okay, so this is how you work with your Selenium and you identify the objects in Selenium. And then even you can do this same thing in one line as well. For so like out here, for one element we are writing two different lines. We are writing two lines of code. Rather, what you can do is that you can simply work with one line itself. That is, I say driver dot find the element by dot id. Id is email, right? And what you want to do with this email field, you want to enter into it. That is, you want to fire the send keys function, right? So you simply can fire the send keys function with it. Okay, and similarly we can do with the button as well. Driver dot find the element by dot id. What is the id? That is, we have next id, right? And I want to click on that button. Okay, so I'll simply comment this part now. Okay, so execution, it starts from the left side. It starts from the left side. First the web element would be extracted and then it will enter the data into the text field. And similarly, first it will extract the next button, the element with id is equal to next, and then it will click on that element. So now if you run your script again, it will do the same stuff. Okay, so it opens up the Firefox browser. Alright. And it enters into the text field and clicks on the next button as well.